Welcome to Wisdom Wednesday. Today, I want to talk about some boundary confusion that I see quite often in the work that I do. What if the problem isn't that you have weak boundaries? What if the problem is that you learned very well how to stay safe? When most people hear the word boundaries, they imagine saying no, speaking up, pushing back, or keeping people out. But boundaries are not really about shutting people out. They're about recognizing what feels right for you and allowing that to matter. And for many women who've lived through abuse and constant emotional pressure, it can become very hard to know when something truly feels right for them. Not because they're weak, not because they're incapable, but because they learned that staying safe often meant keeping the peace, going along, not upsetting someone else, and putting their own feelings last. So now they find themselves in situations where something inside says, I don't want this. And yet the words coming out of their mouths are, sure, okay, no problem. Most women that I speak to don't struggle with boundaries the way they think they do. They struggle with permission. Permission to say no. Permission to take up space. Permission to disappoint someone else without turning it against themselves. And when that permission isn't there, it doesn't matter how many boundary tools you learn. You will still say yes when something inside you is saying no. I was speaking with a woman not too long ago. She had already done the hard part and left an abusive relationship. And she had actually rebuilt a life that on the outside looked pretty good. She told me the story of her recent attendance at a family gathering. Someone had asked her for a favor and she didn't want to do it. She knew she didn't want to do it. And she heard herself say, sure, no problem, automatically. And then later, sitting in her car with her hands on the steering wheel, the negative feelings of failure hit her all at once. The frustration, the anger, the disappointment. But it wasn't directed at them, it was directed at herself. She said she kept saying, I did it again. As we talked, she said something so simple. She said, I don't understand why I keep saying yes every time someone asks me to do something for them. I know I don't want to, but I keep saying yes. I thought I had this figured out already. And here's the part that matters. She didn't say yes because she doesn't know how to say no. She said yes because somewhere in her body and in the deep recesses of her mind, it still felt safer to go along than to risk what might happen if she didn't. That's not weakness. That's adaptation. When you've lived in an environment where your needs weren't safe to express, your system learns very quickly to keep the peace. Don't make it worse. Stay agreeable and be small enough to stay safe. And that learning doesn't just disappear because your circumstances change. You're now in a different life, but your responses, they're still running on old information. And this is where confusion begins because many women start believing something is wrong with them. They think, why can't I just say no? Why do I keep agreeing to things I don't want? Why do I feel guilty the moment someone is disappointed with me? But those responses did not appear out of nowhere. They were learned. And at one time, those responses served a purpose, but that's no longer true. And maybe that can change the way you see yourself. Because a woman without boundaries would not feel the discomfort afterward. She wouldn't feel the hesitation. She would not feel that internal pull. But you do. You do have boundaries. You feel them. You feel them when you pause. You feel them in the hesitation. You feel them in the tightening in your chest. Boundaries are in your quiet inside voice that says, I don't want to do this. The boundary is already there. What's often missing is the belief that you're allowed to honor it. Somewhere along the way, many women learned if someone else is disappointed, upset, frustrated, hurt, or uncomfortable, that they must have done something wrong. So even when your body says no, you override it, not because you don't know what you feel, but because you still question whether your feelings are allowed to matter. And this is where permission begins. Permission to pause before answering. Permission to need the time to think. Permission to change your mind. Permission to not explain every decision. And permission to disappoint others without abandoning yourself in the process. That's a very different thing than pushing people away. When you begin to understand the safety of boundaries, something begins to change. You stop asking, why do I keep doing this? You begin noticing the moment before the automatic yes, the moment where you actually have a choice, the moment when you remember to say, let me think about that, the moment when you notice what you really feel before automatically going along with someone else. And those moments matter. Because this is not about becoming a completely different person overnight. It's about slowly learning that you can hear yourself and choose from awareness instead of old survival patterns. And every time you honor what you really know inside, even in a small way, you begin teaching yourself something new. I'm allowed to matter here too. So let's make this real. The next time someone asks something of you and you feel that moment of tension inside, don't rush to answer. Don't explain yourself to anyone, and don't justify anything. Say one simple sentence. Let me think about that. That's it. No apologies, no extra words. Let me think about that. What this does, it interrupts the automatic yes. It gives you space. And in that space, something very important happens. You begin to choose instead of react. You can still say yes, and you can still say no. But now it's coming from your heart and not from the expectations of others. The choice is not from that part of you that learned to stay safe at any cost. For some of us, saying the phrase, let me think about that, can feel like too much. Well, consider this your permission to begin putting your wants and needs first. You can start small, pause, take a breath. Even that is a shift. Boundaries are not about keeping people out. They are about protecting what matters to you, your time, your energy, your emotional space. And more than that, They're about how you relate to yourself. Every time you override that quiet inner knowing, you reinforce the belief that your needs come second. But every time you pause, even slightly, and choose to put your needs at the top of the list, you begin to rebuild trust with yourself. And this is where confidence actually comes from. Not from saying everything perfectly, but from knowing I can hear myself and I can respond to that. So maybe this week you don't need to fix your boundaries. Maybe this week you simply notice. Notice when you instinctively put yourself last. Notice the moments where you hesitate before saying yes. Notice the moments where something inside you pulls back before you go along with it anyway. Notice the moment where you already know you don't want to do something. Notice the moments where you already know what feels right for you before you talk yourself out of it. Notice the moments where you already know what you want to say. Notice how often your first feeling is actually honest. And give yourself just a little more space to listen. So let's put our hands on our heart and either lower your gaze or close your eyes and just listen for a moment. May you begin to recognize that the parts of you that learn to stay quiet, agreeable, and aware of everyone else were not weakness. They were ways of surviving what you lived through. May you believe that you no longer have to play by the old rules. May you stop measuring yourself against who you think you should be by now. May you begin to notice the moments where your own voice quietly appears. May you notice the pause. May you notice the hesitation. May you notice the moment you realize, I actually don't want this. May you give yourself a little more time before automatically saying yes. May you notice what you truly want before talking yourself out of it. May your no become very clear. May your yes become honest. And may your choices begin to reflect the life you are building now, not the life you had to survive before. And if it feels uncomfortable at first, may you remember you are not doing something wrong simply because someone else is disappointed. You can open your eyes now. You are learning that your feelings, your limits, and your needs are allowed to exist too. One moment, one choice, one honest response at a time. And that's enough for today.